Hey guys, recently I finished Demon Slayer. It's an anime I dropped around 3 years ago because I didn't really find it worthwhile to keep up with. But over time, I keep seeing clips from later arcs like the Mugen Train and the Entertainment District arc, and it kinda piqued my interest again. I started thinking about giving this widely loved series another chance. So what finally made me bite the bullet? Well, it was a video from another media reviewer, Just a Robot, who has tarnished his reputation after some drama, which I'm not really in a position to talk about. He made a video talking about his criticisms of the anime, and not only did I check it out, but I was disappointed to say the least. Based on my limited information and understanding of the series, I still felt like his criticism was in bad faith and completely bastardized the anime. So I was like, fuck it, I'll watch Demon Slayer from start to finish, get a basic understanding of how I personally feel about it after the newer seasons and the movies, then I'll rewatch Jar's video again to better depict my issues with it. But before we get into Jar's video, if you're wondering what my overall thoughts on the show are, I mean, it's fine. I'd probably give it a 6 out of 10 if I'm being fair. I was never really big on the Demon Slayer hype when it first came out, and despite it being an absolute spectacle from a visual standpoint, the story and its core ideas never really stood out to me or interested me in the slightest. That said, I can somewhat understand why the show is so highly loved. Even if I personally don't think it's the best anime, I do have to recognize how successful of a product it is. So if a series is undeniably popular, one that's consistently breaking records, you have to ask, even if you don't personally enjoy it, how do other people like this show so much? And while I was watching it, I did enjoy myself. It was a pleasant watch overall, with some genuinely gut-wrenching moments that I didn't expect a show like this to hit me with. But we're here now responding to and defending Demon Slayer because even though I'm not personally that high on it, I still think it deserves their flowers. So let's get into Jar's video.
Demon Slayer is literally about slaying demons, and that's it. Honestly, it might be the most bare bones anime of all time. When I was growing up, I had Bleach, One Piece, and Naruto. Kids today will never understand what it was like growing up with these. Wait. Hold on. Oh my god, all 3 of them are still going! None of them were perfect by any stretch of the imagination. You can find plenty of videos talking about their plot holes. But each of them had something that made them stand out. Naruto's magic system and world building were interesting to say the least. The villains and the strategies they came up with were mind-blowing. Deidara vs Sasuke is still one of the best written fights I have ever seen. No rivalry will ever top Goku vs Vegeta, but Naruto vs Sasuke is a pretty close second. One Piece. Once you get past the bizarre art style and the whole people get powers by eating fruit thing, you will see that it has a pretty deep plot about uncovering the hidden history of the world. Its setting is one of the most unique in a long-running series. It's a massive ocean world that is even bigger than our own world. They go to different islands, each one unique from the last. Because the islands are so separate from one another, each of them allows for a brand new story arc to begin. For example, the Eneru story arc takes place in the White Sea, a land above the clouds. It's a fascinating exploration of faith and godhood. The first season tricks you into thinking it's going to be a fun and short goofy adventure, only to pull the rug out from under you. Before you know it, you're watching a story about overthrowing the government. When you get to that point, the politics of the world actually makes sense because you have been following along from the start. The third of the big 3 was Bleach. It was okay, but I still loved how its power system worked, for the most part, and how the story centered around souls in the afterlife. All 3 of them definitely had way too much filler, and some painfully slow pacing, but at the end of the day, each one stood out from one another. Demon Slayer, on the other hand, does nothing at all to stand out. A lot of shonen animes get accused about being nothing but fighting demons, or at least fighting stand-ins for demons. And yes, I know they are technically yokai in the original translation. You don't have to tell me in the comments. But in Demon Slayer, Tanjiro fights demons, and only demons.
Normally, in my response videos, it doesn't even take 2 minutes for me to interject and push back on some criticisms or claims I disagree with. But with Jar, I felt like I needed to show the full context of what his opening claim was. That Demon Slayer is simple. That's actually a statement I agree with, but I don't like the way Jar went about using it. He used Demon Slayer's simplicity as a jab against the series, and that's something I fundamentally disagree with. After referring to Demon Slayer as the most bare bones anime, he then compares it to other shonen classics like the entirety of the big 3, along with Dragon Ball. His point is that all 4 of these series have something uniquely their own that separates them from each other and makes them deserving of their flowers. But in that regard, does it not also apply to Demon Slayer? The reason I personally call Demon Slayer simple is because of how easy and digestible the story and world are to get into. It's by far not the most complex or nuanced series out there, but it doesn't have to be. Too many people in media discussions tend to overvalue a show based on how complex it is compared to others, but complexity doesn't always mean good, and simplicity doesn't always mean bad. It just depends on the story you're trying to tell and the audience you want to reach. When it comes to Demon Slayer, its simplicity is what gives its charm. It's a very palatable story that a wide range of people can understand without causing confusion in the plot. And it's so strange that he's trying to knock Demon Slayer for this, but then he brings up Dragon Ball. Longtime viewers know I rock with Goku heavy, he's the GOAT for a reason, but simplicity is what Dragon Ball is known for. That doesn't take away from the show's narrative or values you can get from it, but one of the most common criticisms of Dragon Ball is that it has no story. At least when people are talking about is a strong overarching narrative. Meanwhile, a series like Demon Slayer has a clear structured story driving it forward. Plus, Demon Slayer definitely has a great deal of unique aspects within the plot, story, and world building that Jar, as you'll see, either dismisses or outright discredits. And the last thing I want to mention is a recent criticism I get on the channel that I say a whole lot of nothing, which is fucking bullshit, but that criticism actually refers to Jar, because we're like 2 minutes in and all he said is that Demon Slayer is simple and that he doesn't like it compared to the shows he already likes. The act of using established shows to discredit Demon Slayer is just a wrong approach. All of these are impactful, successful animes with lasting influences on the industry, and comparing them doesn't really have much of a negative impact on Demon Slayer. It's like if someone said I suck at basketball because LeBron James is better than me. You see how that doesn't really work?
Never a dragon, never a monster of a different kind, just demons. And by demons, I really mean vampires who occasionally have magical powers. Say what you will about Bleach, but at least Ichigo fought more than just hollows. But it's not just about what monsters our heroes fight. It's also about how they fight them with their unique powers and weapons. Tanjiro, he uses a sword. Yep, just a regular katana. He doesn't mix it up with another weapon, or a cannon arm, or shuriken, or whatever else.
Two issues. He's using Tanjiro only fighting demons as a point of criticism, which makes no sense since it's called Demon Slayer. I don't know about you, but I expect the show named after the act of killing demons to actually be about people killing demons. This is exactly what I'm referring to. It's not a valid critique of the show's structure. And then he proceeds to once again use Bleach as a frame of reference to criticize Demon Slayer. That's not inherently wrong. You can compare two shows, but only if there's a valid point to make. His point was that Ichigo has fought other things besides hollows, which doesn't hold up because Ichigo's world contains creatures beyond humans and hollows, like Quincy's and other Soul Reapers. Compare that to the world of Demon Slayer, which only has demons and humans. So what did you expect Tanjiro to do? The premise of a main character having a diverse pool of creatures to fight is not a standard within fiction. It depends entirely on the show itself. If it had been mentioned that other monsters existed beyond demons, then sure, that criticism would make sense, but they don't. And another point of contention is how he doesn't even like Tanjiro using a sword to fight, ignoring the fact that the entirety of Demon Slayer revolves around swordsmen, with only a few notable exceptions. That's not inherently a problem, it's just that type of show, which is strange because Demon Slayer actually takes a lot of inspirations from Bleach, with their military task force, the Hashira and the Demon Slayer Corps, compared to the Captain's Guard and the entirety of the Gotei 13, once again with both revolving around swordsmen. You've provided no reasons why Tanjiro should use any other weapon besides personal preferences. That doesn't indicate a flaw within the story itself.
Sure, he got some elemental abilities, but elemental magic is the most generic kind of all. And even then, the elements aren't actually being used. They're just flashy visuals for the audience. Or maybe they're not, it's never made clear. Aside from thunder breathing, that is. Thunder breathing gives its user a unique speed boost. But aside from that, every breathing is not very distinct from one another. They all basically have the same moveset with slightly different flashy effects.
No, Jar is just flat out wrong. Like I said earlier, he's going to dismiss or discredit any attempt by Demon Slayer to set itself apart from the rest of their shonen counterparts. He even downplays the act of breathing, calling it a generic elemental power, which makes no sense. Each breathing style has their own personal spin and unique applications that I'm going to have to explain, but that's okay for a show to do. Using a basic power isn't a critique. Goku has flight and super strength, you wouldn't use that as a criticism against him. The same goes for Mark from Invincible. Each breathing breathing styles in Demon Slayer isn't just a flashy visual, as the show goes in depth on how each form provides a different tangible benefits for its user. For example, thunder breathing allows the swordsman to fight faster, while water breathing helps its users by being more adaptive against their opponents. We see this in how Tanjiro makes up his breathing styles mid-fight from water to sun to thunder as his fighting style adapts and evolves.
Oh yeah, I should probably explain for those of you who are out of the loop. In Demon Slayer, the Demon Slayers can breathe in a special way. It amps their body, allowing them to fight evenly with a demon. Yep, you heard that right. Instead of chi or chakra, this world magic systems works on breathing. In order to be on par with a demon, you don't need magical powers, you just need to breathe in a specific way.
And what's wrong with that? Breathing is one of the most undervalued things we as humans can do when it comes to any physical activity. Simply changing the way you breathe can make a huge difference. We see this in professional athletes, performers, and singers. I like how Demon Slayer takes this lesser known concept and makes it appealing to a wide audience. You being dismissive to the fact that this might be a decent way to fight demons in their show, as to just breathe differently, completely undermines the intent of the series. We don't just see the physical benefits of proper breathing, for example, Zenitsu slowing down his poison by controlling his heart rate, we also see the drawbacks. The user's body can take a real toll, and messing up a breathing technique can have serious consequences. The fact that Demon Slayer at its core relies on only breathing technique actually highlights the straight gap between a typical demon who possess super strength, speed, and a great healing factor alongside literal magic compared to our average Demon Slayer core member. It really shows off the grit and determination that humans have as they're forced to rely on their natural biology in an already brutal mismatched fight. And despite that, they still have to persevere, because it's not just the techniques alone, it's the testament to the strength of the human will.
Wow, this might be the lamest magic system I've ever heard of ever. Luffy was always creative with his stretchy abilities, and Naruto used his shadow clones in ways I never even thought of. Just imagine if One Piece was only about Luffy using super strength to punch people, or if Naruto was doing nothing but Rasengan spamming from the start. It would have been boring. Ichigo isn't much better in this regard either, just to be clear, but at least the rest of the cast in Bleach have unique powers and abilities.
Once again, this is a false attempt at making a comparison. He used the big three to critique how Tanjiro should fight as a main character. I haven't watched Naruto or One Piece, so I let those slide, but I have seen Bleach, and it's kind of strange seeing him give Bleach a pass since other characters besides Ichigo are more unique, especially when Tanjiro is arguably more creative than Ichigo relative to their own series. And on top of that, there are other unique fighters in Demon Slayer, like the Snake Hashira and Love Hashira, who can bend and maneuver their swords at crazy angles during a fight, and then Nosuke with his beast breathing that primarily highlights his awareness and his instincts to detect an opponent.
But Tanjiro's sword isn't just any sword, it's a super durable blade that can burn demons with the power of the sun, kind of like something out of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 1 and 2. So what is it made of? Well, that's one of the most interesting parts of the anime. You see, the demon slaying swords are made out of shards from meteorites. They are forged in volcanoes, blessed by priests, and then... I'm just joking. Both the manga and the anime never explain it.
They simply do not need to over-explain it. With the existence of wisteria flowers, the show already sets up the concept of naturally forming materials that are great deterrents for demons. In a society that revolves around hunting demons, it makes sense that people will already make the connection about which materials are more effective than others. And I don't need to even harp on this point any longer, because the show already tells us why Nichiren blades are so effective. They're made from a material that naturally absorbs sunlight, so it basically functions as a sun blade.
But at least the demons have an interesting origin story, right? Nope. Muzan was just a spoiled rich prince who got sick. His doctor created a potion that gave him superpowers, but Muzan killed him before he could experience its full effect, and now he's obsessed with recreating it.
When it comes to Muzan, I do believe he's nowhere near the greatest antagonist, but you're still downplaying him in his narrative role. What I can appreciate about Muzan is how much he provides a good parallel to Tanjiro, and how he does a great job of haunting the narrative of Demon Slayer. He has this barbaric, sadistic aura that makes you automatically pay attention anytime he's on screen. One of my core takeaways from Demon Slayer is its exploration of what it means to lose or keep your humanity. The origin of Muzan becoming the first ever demon is the story of a man simply trying to defeat death, surviving his horrible disease, and growing increasingly bitter and hostile. By the time that his doctor, who is generally trying his best to save him, managed to achieve some sort of success, Muzan unjustly kills him, only realizing the benefit of what his doctor did too late. This refusal to simply accept his death fuels Muzan's ego and becomes a fundamental aspect of his philosophy, which all of his demons share: the rejection of a finite pinpoint human mortality. They view dying as a form of weakness and don't see a finite life as truly living. Muzan's attempt to conquer the sun are just the final stage of his plan, extending beyond his limits and becoming more of a godlike figure. In most interactions Tanjiro has with other demons, the demons are always looking down on humans, seeing themselves as a higher life form. They're effectively immortal, they have excess amount of power, so it's totally understandable how they can view themselves superior to humans, but they're not. Their murdering and consumption of humans to maintain their existence isn't worth their humanity. They're in a constant cycle of hunger, existing only to please Muzan, who is the linchpin of all demons. By conquering his disease, he became the world's first demon, and being the first to throw away his humanity. From then on, he spreads his disease of being a demon to other humans. Humans that he initially took pity on, promising them strength in exchange for survival, which they end up being subjected to his influence, effectively making Muzan a cancer within the Demon Slayer world. He became the disease that he was trying to fight off.
As for every other demon, Muzan just created them by putting his blood into other humans. Yeah, you see what I mean by these things being vampires and not demons? That's it. Muzan's origin story is about as complicated as Captain America's, and he came out decades ago. He's no Madara or Sosuke Aizen.
He doesn't have to be an Aizen or a Madara to be a good villain. He's a different archetype of a villain, one needed for a story like Demon Slayer to follow. And for a series as simple and easy to understand as Demon Slayer, it's crazy how you're speaking down on it and disregarding everything in this pseudo-intellectual attempt at a critique video.
Or, I don't know, Buggy the Clown? He's an even more interesting villain than this guy. Honestly, if Captain Buggy was the main villain throughout all of Demon Slayer, I think that would fix the entire anime. But is the main character interesting? Not really. Tanjiro isn't the worst protagonist I've seen, but he's way too much of a goody two-shoes.
That's kinda like his narrative purpose. In a world with villains as vindictive and ruthless as Muzan, you need a character who's lighthearted to balance that out. That's why I say the two are great parallels. Muzan represents what it means to reject your humanity, while Tanjiro embodies its full acceptance. Where Muzan is a dark, deep tunnel, Tanjiro is a small candle light that ignites into flames, bringing hope and positivity in a world filled with despair. This aligns perfectly with the core Demon Slayer, children and young soldiers who already put their lives on the line every day, often without appreciation from the general public. Tanjiro's mindset is infectious enough to change an entire person's demeanor, showing the impact of humanity and compassion even in the harshest world. At this point, you're not saying anything of value in this video. All you're doing is basically saying, I personally don't prefer this, therefore it's bad.
Cries constantly, and he gets random power-ups out of nowhere. No, granted, that last point applies to a lot of shonen protagonists, but it's still a problem.
Tanjiro does not get a random power-up, which makes Jar's criticism completely false. What actually happens in the anime is that Tanjiro slowly realized with his newfound information that he can use what his father taught him in the past and placed it in his current predicament and apply it to his advantage. Since episode 1 has shown signs of him being a good tactician with real talent, and that's something that the anime does really well, calling attention to the proper teaching Tanjiro received from his father, this sets up future plot points and drive the narrative forward while keeping the viewer entertained.
And even if I could look past all of that, he's just boring. Bro lost his whole family and he gets over it pretty quickly. He starts smiling because he has a chance to save his sister. Speaking of his sister, Nezuko's personality basically breaks down to 70% cute and mute, 20% angry, and 10% normal human. Honestly, she's more of a MacGuffin than a person. It honestly amazes me that Tanjiro loses everything, discovers demons are real, and basically goes, oh well, guess I'll become a demon slayer. The dude literally shows more emotion during some of his training than he does after his entire family is killed.
That's wrong on every level. Throughout the entire series, Tanjiro continually has moments of sorrow and conflict over not being there when his family was killed. Sure, he sometimes smiles a lot. That's just a representation of his persistent positive nature. He's meant to represent hope within the narrative confines of Demon Slayer. Muzan is despair and Tanjiro is hope. That's the most surface level takeaway, and I don't think I'm saying anything crazy or special. It's so strange. You implied that he got over his family even though his entire purpose of joining the Demon Slayer Corps is to ultimately avenge them. Tanjiro may be a goody two-shoes, but he has a righteous heart and believes in justice. The very first time he saw Muzan, he wanted to end him right then and there, only stopping jumping out of the sake of his apparent family that he saw at the time. Every other time he encounters a demon committing heinous acts, we see a level of anger taking over Tanjiro's body as he relates to the trauma that he felt witnessing his own family die. Calling a character like Tanjiro boring just ignores his deep emotional depth as a character.
Naruto, Bleach, and One Piece all had unique, interesting worlds, but Demon Slayer's world building falls apart once you apply any logic to it. For starters, aside from the demon hunters, no one in this world believes in demons, even though they've existed for hundreds of years. In our real world, back during the time period this anime takes place, people didn't see demons walking around, and they still believed in them. Even now, people believe in Bigfoot, aliens, and other legends.
Okay, two things. Similar to our real world back then, only a small percentage of the population deeply believed in the supernatural. Unlike in Demon Slayer, demons actually exist. The reason the general public isn't aware of them is simple. It's for their protection. Widespread awareness of demons can horribly impact their way of life. And let's add some logic. The average Demon Slayer can barely take down a single lower moon demon. So imagine if one demon attacked a group of 5 to 10 people, with maybe only one barely escaping. That will likely be their first near-death encounter with a demon. And usually when people come across something they can't fully comprehend, they start to either ignore or rationalize it as a coping mechanism. We see this in the Stone Hashira's backstory with the little girl who witnessed a demon attack their family. Because of her state of confusion, she actually blamed the Stone Hashira for the murders. And think about it, place yourself in this time period with no forethoughts or information about demons. You recognize a wandering traveler that you remember was traveling in a group. You ask where his compatriots are, and he said that they got killed by a bunch of demons. Would you believe that? Probably not. With a story like this being scrutinized, the only people that will possibly believe you is probably close friends and some family members who can pass on your stories, with the result of them being a folktale or a rumor. He goes on to explain how even people right now believe in the supernatural, but completely ignores the facts that Demon Slayer take place around the 1900s. Sure, some early modern technology existed, but it's clear that they don't have a widespread tech to help them with communication. They don't have access to cell phones or the internet. For fuck's sakes, they get their news via messenger crows. This is my point. The reason that a lot of people quote unquote believe in the supernatural right now is because they can talk about it with other people across the world on the fucking internet. While incorporating the time period that Demon Slayer takes place, we have to recognize spreading information must have been a tedious accomplishment.
Sure, people didn't believe in hollows in Bleach, but that's because they were invisible. Ignoring demons doesn't make the story better, it makes it worse, especially when people have family members who survived a demon encounter before. I'm also not a fan of how demon slayers go off on their own to fight demons, even when they are the lowest rank. At the start, we see hundreds of candidates in the recruitment process, only 5 survive, and somehow those same 5 end up fighting some of the strongest demons in the world, and they all live.
For the most part, they don't, and when they do, it's usually a group effort, usually being assisted by a Hashira. Plus, all of them either have an innate ability that allows them to fight on par with stronger demons, or they were trained by already strong former Hashiras, or current ones, with the exception of Inosuke. And again, it's common for a shonen series to have their main cast be relatively strong, especially when we see them constantly training to get stronger throughout the whole show.
Yes, you heard me right, there's a ranking system. But just like in Naruto, most of the ranks don't actually matter. It's brought up like once or twice, then forgotten about. Okay, I'm not being fair. Naruto handled this ranking system much better. There's only 2 ranks that matter: the Hashira, those at the top, and everybody below them. One of the Hashira's name is Shinobu. She's too weak to decapitate demons, and before you ask if this is a sexist thing, there are 2 other female demon slayers in this series, and they are capable of decapitating demons. You're probably wondering how the only demon slayer who isn't capable of decapitating demons became the highest rank. Well, you see, she uses poison made from wisteria flower. It weakens demons, slows their ability to regenerate, and enough of this poison will kill them. Wow, that's interesting, but I have one question. Why doesn't every single demon slayer use this? They all use their special swords, and they all use breathing techniques, so why not this poison as well? It's an extremely useful tool. And before you ask, no, it's never explained that this flower is incredibly rare or the poison is super hard to make. Every demon slayer should be required to have this stuff on their person. This character's introduction and the way her power works completely breaks how the verse is supposed to function. She doesn't even really serve any purpose within the story. You could write her out and nothing would change. In fact, getting rid of her would cover up a pretty big plot hole.
This is bullshit. The existence of Shinobu as a character doesn't break the verse in any sense. The reason it's not required for all Demon Slayer core members to use their poison is simple. They don't need it. If a core member is relatively fast and strong enough to decapitate a demon, poison serves no real purpose. It will only interfere in the way they fight. The only reason Shinobu's poison is even effective, since she's physically weaker than the average Slayer, the way she fights is fundamentally different. The way that Shinobu fights revolves around her agility, her precision, and being light on her feet, only striking to inject her poison. And saying she's not important is crazy because, besides Giyu, she's the most important Hashira. In terms of plot relevancy, she's integral to Kano's character development, and she played a big role in how Tanjiro acquired concentration breathing, which deeply evolved his swordsmanship. And after watching the Demon Slayer movie, yeah, I'm taking no slander after that.
Aye, I'm your little butterfly.
Also, I'm here.
Out of any anime I have seen, Demon Slayer probably has the lamest super form ever. The Demon Slayer mark. Bankai's in Bleach transform your normal sword into a cool new powerful weapon, and Luffy's 2nd through 4th gear, they give him unique abilities. Each gear changes his body more and more, but there are some drawbacks. Naruto's 12 transformations all look awesome in their own way, but the Demon Slayer mark looks about as cool as a cutie mark from My Little Pony. By the way, this mark wasn't something the other Demon Slayers had until Tanjiro showed up. Once he achieved his, the others got theirs. So it's kind of like Super Saiyan in a way. Once one character achieves it, the rest are guaranteed to follow.
It's almost like Tanjiro is the main character, and the narrative has been setting him up to be the one to ultimately defeat Muzan. And the anime does explain how the Demon Slayer marks function. As the story goes on, we understood that there's an underlying connection between Tanjiro's family and Yoriichi, the original Sun Breather. What we can infer is that one of Tanjiro's ancestors were a close friend of Yoriichi, allowing him to pass down his teaching through generations, eventually reaching Tanjiro. This teaching, the art of sun breathing, the very technique Tanjiro has been using for the better half of Demon Slayer. It's also worth noting that for a Slayer to obtain a mark, they had to be put in a near-death moment while in combat in the presence of a sun breather.
Like a super form bargain sale. And if you're wondering why Tanjiro got it first, good for you, because the story never really explains it.
As you already see, I explained it perfectly. It just seems that JR fails to understand basic storytelling.
But what about the other characters? Well, there's Zenitsu, whose whole personality boils down to being horny and cowardly. Basically how people see me. And yeah, I don't really like his character. Surprisingly, a lot of the fanbase find him relatable, and I can imagine why. If you're wondering how he manages to fight demons despite being terrified, the answer is this. He just passes out, and then somehow fights like a pro.
I've always found this a cool aspect of Zenitsu's character. If you wonder why he seems to lock in when he's like unconscious or sleeping, it's probably because Zenitsu's main problem is that he gets his own way a lot. Despite being trained by former Hashira and having the potential of mastering thunder breathing, he is held back by his own fears and doubt. So when he's subconscious, we can finally see the fruit of his labor and training. And not only that, as we saw in the new Demon Slayer movie, Zenitsu can fully lock in when he needed to, showcasing how strong he really is.
Can I nail your sister?
No!
I'm gonna.
There's Inosuke, the boar guy. He's perfect. I have no issues with his character at all. He makes me laugh, and honestly, I think he should be the main character. Can someone make a video called Demon Slayer, but it's only Inosuke? Because I would totally watch that.
I'm Inosuke! I live to kill demons, I haven't washed his forehead in 3 months!
I could smell.
But I'm also very pretty.
That is actually way more disturbing than the boarhead. Please put it back on.
With pleasure!
Then there's Rengoku. When we first meet him, he wants to kill Nezuko and have Tanjiro executed for protecting her. But right after that, he suddenly changes and becomes a chill, likable guy. And then he dies. This character development is so fast and so nonsensical that it gave me whiplash. I think my biggest problem with Rengoku is that he's intentionally written in a way that makes us sad when he dies. Now I know what you're gonna say. Well, Jar, when a main character dies, we're supposed to feel sad about their death. I get that, but he was literally just put into the train story arc so that he could die. We get to know about his character and his sad backstory on the train. We find out that he's a nice and cool and awesome guy, only for him to be taken away from us far too early. But when we first met him, he was totally willing to kill Tanjiro's sister. Personally, I think it would have been better if this guy had some character flaws. For example, he could have been very standoffish towards Tanjiro and treated Nezuko like she was a monster who was about to snap. But But then during the battle with the really powerful demon, he would see that Nezuko was protecting the people on the train, causing him to have a change of heart, and then after that he can die. But no, the writer had to make him completely perfect all the way from the start, because the writer doesn't know how to write.
A death in a show is supposed to feel impactful, and we see exactly that in how the entire tone changes once he's gone. At the same time, it sets up how strong the upper moons are, since Rengoku, by all means, wasn't weak in the slightest. Then Jar suggested that Rengoku should have been given more character flaws to create more heated tension between him and Tanjiro, which doesn't work because to me, Rengoku is just another version of Tanjiro. Yeah, he was dismissive of Nezuko at first, but after being persuaded by their boss, he came to accept her and believed in her cause, seeing the good in her just like Tanjiro did. His death signals a fate Tanjiro could face if he doesn't get stronger. It's about the weight of their consequences and the stake of the world.
Then there's Genya. He can't use breathing techniques. If you're wondering as to why, good for you. But what he can do is gain demon powers by eating other demons. Why does he have this ability? Again, good for you. The only explanation we get is that he has special organs. I mean, I guess that's better than nothing, but it's still not enough, especially when he's the only person in the world who can do this.
Even though I don't watch Naruto, there are still characters like Rock Lee who don't have any natural talent or affinity for ninjutsu or genjutsu. This can be similar to Demon Slayer, where some people simply don't have the natural talent to learn breathing techniques. We see this in Rengoku's younger brother, who come from a deep line of fire Hashira. And as for Genya defeating demons, I can see how that might be a problem since it was not outright explained, but the show already introduces abilities that are heightened to an extreme level, like Tanjiro's sense of smell and Zenitsu's hearing, along with Inosuke's extreme sense of awareness. Genya's eating ability is pretty consistent within the world building of Demon Slayer.
The author also tries to make you feel bad for most of the demons by giving them a tragic backstory. The problem is, we don't get those backstories until after they're already dead. It would have been far more interesting to see them earlier, at the start or even in the middle of the fight, rather than a last-minute sympathy grab.
But we're going to give you our sad backstories right before you kill us so it feels extra tragic.
Fair enough.
You see, when I was a child, I was super sick, but when I was a demon, I wasn't sick, and then I could have the family I always wanted!
That's really sad, but I feel like this would have been way more dramatic if the audience had known that ahead of time!
Sure, I guess you could call it a sympathy grab if you're ignorant to the fact that once you become a demon, Muzan has direct control of your mind and body, with the vast majority of these demons losing their memory from their human days. Since becoming a demon means rejecting your humanity entirely and becoming something new, it only makes sense that when a demon is dying, they're being freed from Muzan's grasp, and from then on, they start to remember their human past.
And honestly, what does it even change? Newsflash! Everyone has a sob story, but that gives you no right to hurt others. These backstories don't really add anything to the story or build on its themes. They're just tacked on at the last minute.
It builds off the soul's theme of humanity. All of these demons were targeted by Muzan at the most darkest and most vulnerable states. Seeing their stories doesn't excuse their actions they took as demons. It allows for us, the audience, to still empathize with them. We see this through Tanjiro. It's similar to Bleach when a person becomes a hollow. The action they committed as a hollow isn't reflected of their character or how they live as a person, as a human.
Now, I don't want to just bash this show. There's a plot point that's actually handled well. A good demon who refuses to eat humans is working on a way to turn demons back into people. To do this, she needs the blood of the strongest demons. Throughout the story, Tanjiro collects this blood and sends it to her. Eventually, she creates a potion that weakens the big bad, making it possible for our heroes to defeat him. Say what you will about Demon Slayer, but that's actually a solid idea. Way better handled than what She-Hulk tried to pull off. After everything I've pointed out, you might be wondering, why does this anime have so many fans? The answer is simple: the animation. And yeah, I'll give it that. The animation is jaw-droppingly good. Honestly, I wish this level of animation had been used for something like Naruto or Bleach instead of this. The character designs are solid, and the music is good too, I guess. But at the end of the day, great visuals can't cover up for weak writing. Currently, we have slop content and slop games, but before that we had slop anime. Demon Slayer is just another flashy example of style over substance. So yeah, it's not the future of shonen, it's just another reminder that amazing production can't cover up for average writing. And that's why, to me, Demon Slayer isn't a masterpiece. It's just another piece of slop.
Demon Slayer is not a piece of slop. It has a lot going for it in terms of its writing. You just struggle to even engage with it on a surface level, and you want every information to be directly spoon-fed to you. And while I do agree a big part of Demon Slayer's success is due to the fact of how it visually looks when it comes to their character design and animation, we both can agree that great animation doesn't cover up for a bad story. But when it comes to Demon Slayer, I don't think their animation is a crutch. The anime storytelling does a solid job if you take the time to deconstruct and appreciate the depth within the writing. Overall, this was a pretty bad video criticizing Demon Slayer, with Jar showing his incompetence pertaining to the show, failing to properly explain or engage certain details, which would be entirely his fault for not properly analyzing the series. Like I said before, I don't think Demon Slayer is a masterpiece or even as good as some other animes like My Hero, Black Clover, Fire Force, or even Dr. Stone, but it's not inherently horrible. It was a pretty fun watch through with some saving grace within his writing, which shouldn't be ignored. Granted, I'm not the most knowledgeable Demon Slayer fan, nor the most analytical person, but if you can properly deconstruct the show's themes, concepts, and ideas better than me, then feel free to do so in the comment section down below, since we need people like you to help defend the show from people like Jar. But until next time, I'm your host Taken, and we do a little reviewing around here. Peace out.